"They stole my legacy," I roared, my voice echoing across the empty porch of my Montana home, the only sound louder than the pounding in my chest. I'm Jake Thornton, a third-generation rancher, and my 15,000-acre ranch wasn't just land, it was my blood, sweat, and soul poured into every blade of grass, every fence post, every sunrise I watched over my cattle. This sprawling piece of big sky country had been in my family for nearly a century, passed down from my grandfather, who tamed it with his bare hands, to my father, who taught me the meaning of hard work, to me, who dreamed of leaving it to my kids someday. But on a crisp October morning, a single letter shattered that dream. The local HOA, some high and mighty group I'd barely heard of, claimed they'd sold my ranch for unpaid dues. Unpaid dues? I wasn't even part of their association. My land was miles outside their gated community, free and clear of their rules. Yet they'd exploited a legal loophole, forged documents, and sold my life's work to a shady developer for millions. I was gutted, furious, and ready to fight. They'd messed with the wrong cowboy, and I was about to make them pay. The letter arrived in a plain envelope, but its words hit like a sledgehammer. It stated that my ranch had been auctioned off due to delinquent HOA fees totaling $12,000, fees I'd never owed, never agreed to, never even been notified about. The HOA, led by a slick lawyer named Richard Vance, had somehow convinced the county that my property fell under their jurisdiction. I drove to their office that same day, my boots kicking up dust as I stormed in, demanding answers. Vance, with his polished suit and smug grin, leaned back in his chair and said, "Mr. Thornton, you should have read the fine print." Fine print? My ranch predated their gated community by decades. I wasn't part of their world of manicured lawns and petty regulations, but they'd manipulated records, claiming my land was annexed into their association without my consent. The sale was already finalized, and a developer was set to turn my rolling hills into a luxury resort, complete with golf courses and condos. My home, my cattle, my family's history, gone, all because of their greed. I stood there, fists clenched, staring at Vance and his cronies, their faces dripping with arrogance. They thought they'd won, that I'd slink away like others they'd bullied. But I saw the ranch in my mind, the barn where I'd learned to ride, the creek where I'd fished with my dad, the fields where my kids played. This wasn't just about land. It was personal. They'd stolen my past and my future, and I swore I'd get it back. I didn't know how yet, but I knew one thing. Richard Vance and his HOA board had no idea what kind of storm was coming. I wasn't just a rancher. I was a fighter, and I'd make sure they regretted crossing me. This was war. Back at the cramped cabin we'd rented after being forced off our ranch, I sat at a wobbly kitchen table with my wife, Emily, the HOA's letter crumpled in my hand. The cabin smelled of damp wood and felt like a cage compared to the open fields of our home. Emily's eyes were red from crying, but her jaw was set. "We're not losing everything, Jake," she said, her voice steady despite the pain. "We need to fight smart." She was right. Anger alone wouldn't get our ranch back. We needed a plan and we needed help. I called Sarah Coleman, a property lawyer I'd met years ago at a county fair. Sarah was a force of nature, sharp, fearless, and known for taking on big dogs and winning. When I told her about the HOA's letter, her voice crackled with outrage. Over the phone. "This stinks of fraud, Jake," she said. "Send me everything you've got. We're going to tear this apart." That call was the first spark of hope I'd felt since the letter arrived. Sarah drove out to the cabin the next day, her laptop and a stack of legal pads in tow. We spread out on the table, piecing together what little we knew. The HOA's claim hinged on my ranch being part of their association, but that made no sense. My land was 5 miles outside their gated community, separated by open fields and a county road. Sarah started digging, requesting documents from the county and the HOA. What we found was a web of lies so brazen it took my breath away. The HOA had forged a boundary amendment document, claiming my ranch had been annexed into their jurisdiction back in 2015. The problem: that document didn't exist in any public record before the sale. They'd also fabricated a series of notices about unpaid dues, complete with my forged signature, sent to an address I'd never lived at. The county clerk, a nervous man named Harold Grayson, had stamped these fakes without question. Sarah's eyes narrowed. "This isn't just sloppy," she said. "This is criminal." We spent weeks unraveling the scam. Sarah subpoenaed HOA records, and what came back was a goldmine of corruption. Emails between Richard Vance and Pinnacle Resorts, the developer who'd bought my ranch, showed they'd planned the sale for months. One message from Vance read, "Thornton's a nobody rancher. He won't fight." Another outlined a $2 million commission the HOA board split among themselves, funneled through shell accounts. They'd bribed Grayson with $50,000 to backdate records, ensuring the sale looked legit. But the HOA's greed didn't stop with me. Sarah found complaints from other homeowners, families who'd lost homes over inflated dues or minor violations, like unapproved mailbox colors. The HOA had a pattern: target vulnerable owners, seize properties with flimsy excuses, and sell to developers for profit. My ranch, with its prime location and vast acreage, was their biggest score yet. Every discovery fueled my rage, but it also sharpened my focus. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every family they'd crushed. Emily and I stayed up late, reading through victim testimonies Sarah collected. There was Maria, a single mom who'd lost her home over a $200 fine. Tom, a retiree forced out after refusing to pay a sudden $5,000 assessment, and dozens more. The HOA operated like a mafia, hiding behind legal jargon and their gated community's pristine image. But they'd underestimated me. I wasn't some city dweller they could intimidate with paperwork. I'd grown up fixing fences in blizzards and staring down coyotes. I could handle a pack of suits. Sarah brought in a private investigator named Mike, a grizzled ex-cop with a knack for digital forensics. Mike hacked into the HOA's poorly, secured server legally with a court order, and found deleted emails that sealed the deal. One thread showed Vance laughing about squeezing Thornton out while planning a Bahamas trip with his cut of the sale. Another revealed the HOA's board had been skimming community funds for years, using dues to pay for personal luxuries. Mike even traced a yacht purchase to Vance's name, bought days after my ranch was sold. Sarah grinned as we reviewed the evidence. "They've built their own gallows," she said. "We just need to pull the lever." By the time we were done, we had a mountain of proof, forged documents, bribe receipts, and a clear trail of fraud. The HOA thought they were untouchable, but we were about to turn their world upside down. One late night, as Sarah, Mike, our private investigator, and I sat bleary-eyed over stacks of documents and cold coffee, the air in our makeshift war room felt electric with possibility. We'd uncovered enough dirt to bury the HOA, but Sarah wanted more than just my ranch back. She leaned back in her chair, her sharp eyes glinting under the cabin's dim light. "Jake," she said, her voice low and deliberate, "suing for your ranch is step one. But if we stop there, they'll just find another victim. We need to hit them where it hurts, their wallets, their egos, their homes." I leaned forward, my heart racing. "Their homes?" I asked. Sarah nodded, a sly grin spreading across her face. "The HOA board members live in those fancy mansions in their gated community. Those properties are tied to the HOA's legal structure. If we can prove their corruption, we can challenge their titles and turn their own game against them." It was a wild idea, audacious and risky. But the thought of flipping the script on Vance and his cronies lit a fire in me. I was all in. Mike, our PI, had been quietly sipping his coffee. But now he chimed in, his gravelly voice cutting through the silence. "I've got something you'll want to see." He pulled out a thick folder labeled HOA Assets and slid it across the table. Mike had been digging into the board members' finances, tailing them to meetings, and hacking into their digital footprints, always within legal bounds. thanks to Sarah's court orders. What he'd found was a gold mine. The HOA board, led by Richard Vance, Linda Carter, and Greg Hollis, had been siphoning community funds for years. They'd used homeowner dues, money meant for streetlights, parks, and maintenance, to bankroll their lavish lifestyles. Vance had a $1.2 million yacht docked in California, Carter owned a vacation home in Aspen, and Hollis had just thrown a $200,000 wedding for his daughter, complete with a private jet for the guests. Mike's spreadsheets showed millions funneled into offshore accounts, disguised as consulting fees or investment opportunities. It was theft, plain and simple, and they'd been getting away with it for years. But the real bombshell was about their homes. Mike discovered that the gated community where the board members lived was built on land technically owned by the HOA itself, not the individual homeowners. This was a quirk in the community's founding documents, likely a scam from the start. The board members' titles to their mansions were riddled with legal errors, missing signatures, unfiled deeds, and violations of their own bylaws. Sarah's eyes lit up as she read through Mike's findings. "This is it," she said, tapping the folder. "Their homes are their pride and joy, but they're also their Achilles heel. We can use their own rules to take them down." The HOA's bylaws stated that board members could lose their property rights if found guilty of breaching fiduciary duties, like, say, embezzling millions. Sarah's plan was to prove their corruption, invalidate their titles, and push for the legal sale of their homes to compensate victims, including me. I sat back, stunned. The idea of selling Vance's mansion out from under him felt like poetic justice. I could already picture his smug face crumpling as he realized he'd lost everything. But Sarah cautioned us. This wouldn't be easy. "Vance has connections," she said. "Judges, county officials, even a state senator in his pocket. We need to be airtight, and we need leverage." That's when Mike suggested we widen the net. "There are others," he said. "Other victims of the HOA. If we rally them, we've got a stronger case and a bigger impact." He'd tracked down a dozen former homeowners who'd lost properties to the HOA's schemes. A retired teacher forced out for unpaid fines, a single mom whose home was seized over a $200 lien, a farmer whose land was taken for non-compliance. Their stories mirrored mine, and their anger was palpable. We spent the next week meeting these victims in secret, gathering their testimonies and documents. Emily organized the group, turning our cabin into a hub of resistance. One night, a woman named Clara, who'd lost her family's cottage, broke down as she recounted how the HOA had harassed her elderly mother into signing over their deed. "They're monsters," she whispered. That sealed it for me. This fight wasn't just about my ranch anymore. It was about justice for everyone they'd crushed. Sarah crafted a strategy. We'd file a class action lawsuit, combining my case with the others, to expose the HOA's pattern of fraud. The centerpiece would be a motion to seize the board members' homes under their own bylaws, using their corruption as the legal hook. Mike kept digging, uncovering more evidence. A recorded call where Vance bragged about taking care of Thornton's land, and a paper trail linking Pinnacle Resorts to the HOA's offshore accounts. As we finalized the plan, I felt a mix of hope and nerves. We were taking on a Goliath. Vance and his board had money, lawyers, and influence. But we had truth, evidence, and a growing army of victims ready to testify. Sarah looked at me, her voice steady. "Jake, when we walk into that courtroom, we're not just fighting for your ranch. We're tearing down their empire." I nodded, picturing my ranch's rolling hills, my kids running through the fields, my family's legacy restored. The HOA thought they could break me, but they'd underestimated a rancher's grit. We were ready to strike, and their day of reckoning was coming. The courtroom was a powder keg, packed to the rafters with a buzzing crowd of neighbors, reporters, and HOA victims who'd come to see justice served. The air crackled with anticipation as I sat at the plaintiff's table, my wife Emily gripping my hand under the table, her eyes fixed on the judge's bench. Sarah Coleman, our lawyer, stood tall, her presence commanding the room like a general on a battlefield. Across from us, Richard Vance and his HOA board, Linda Carter, Greg Hollis, and two others, sat with their high-priced lawyers, their faces a mix of defiance and unease. They'd walked in with the same smug confidence I'd seen in Vance's office months ago, but as Sarah began our case, I could see their armor starting to crack. This was the moment we'd been building toward, the culmination of months of digging, planning, and rallying victims. We weren't just fighting for my ranch. We were here to dismantle their empire. Sarah started with the bombshell evidence. We'd uncovered the forged annexation agreement that falsely placed my 15,000-acre ranch under HOA control, the fabricated notices of unpaid dues, and the bribe payments to County Clerk Harold Grayson. She projected emails onto a large screen, each one a nail in the HOA's coffin. One email from Vance to Pinnacle Resorts CEO Carla Monroe read, "Thornton's land is a done deal. He's a nobody. Won't fight back." The crowd murmured, and I felt Emily's grip tighten. Sarah's voice was steady but razor-sharp, as she detailed how the HOA had bribed Grayson with $50,000 in consulting fees to backdate records, ensuring the illegal sale went through. She presented bank statements, wire transfers, and even a recorded phone call, courtesy of Mike's investigative work, where Vance bragged about taking care of Thornton's land like we did the others. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Harper, leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as the evidence piled up. But Sarah wasn't done. She pivoted to the HOA's broader pattern of abuse, bringing forward testimonies from other victims. Clara, the woman whose elderly mother had lost her cottage, took the stand, her voice trembling but resolute as she described the HOA's harassment. "They sent letters every week, claiming we owed thousands for violations we never committed," she said. "When my mom couldn't pay, they took our home. A retired teacher, a single mom, and a farmer followed, each sharing stories of liens, seizures, and intimidation." The courtroom was silent, the weight of their pain palpable. Sarah tied it all together, showing how the HOA had used the same tactics on me, forging documents and exploiting legal loopholes to steal properties for Pinnacle Resorts, who paid them millions in kickbacks. "This isn't just fraud," Sarah declared, her voice ringing out. "It's a criminal enterprise, preying on hard-working people while the board lives like kings." Then came the masterstroke. Sarah introduced our countermove, a motion to seize the board members' homes under their own bylaws. She explained that the HOA's gated community was built on land owned by the association, not the individual board members. Their property titles were riddled with errors, missing signatures, unfiled deeds, and violations of fiduciary duties. Mike's evidence showed the board had embezzled millions from community funds, using homeowner dues for yachts, vacation homes, and lavish weddings. Sarah argued that the HOA's own rules allowed for the repossession of board members' properties if they breached their fiduciary responsibilities. "They stole from the community, from Mr. Thornton, from Clara, and countless others," Sarah said, pointing at the board. "Their homes, built on the backs of their victims, should be sold to make things right." Vance's lawyer, a slick city attorney named Paul Drexler, tried to fight back. He argued that the HOA's actions were administrative oversights, not fraud, and that my ranch's sale was a good-faith error. He painted Vance and the board as upstanding citizens, victims of a witch hunt by a disgruntled rancher. But Judge Harper wasn't buying it. She interrupted Drexler, her voice like steel. "Forged documents, bribes, and millions in stolen funds are not oversights, Mr. Drexler. This is a gross abuse of power." The crowd erupted in whispers, and I saw Vance's face pale. Sarah sealed the deal with a final piece of evidence, a contract between the HOA and Pinnacle Resorts, signed by Vance, promising a $2 million commission for my ranch, proof they knew the sale was illegal. The trial stretched over 3 days, each one more intense than the last. Vance took the stand, his arrogance crumbling under Sarah's cross-examination. He stammered, unable to explain the offshore accounts or the recorded call. Linda Carter and Greg Hollis fared no better, their excuses falling apart under the weight of Mike's evidence. On the final day, Judge Harper delivered her ruling. "The evidence is overwhelming," she said. "The sale of Mr. Thornton's ranch is void. The property is to be returned immediately." The courtroom cheered, and Emily hugged me, tears in her eyes. But Harper wasn't finished.
"Furthermore," she continued, "the HOA board's actions constitute a breach of fiduciary duty. Their properties, held under the HOA's authority, are hereby ordered sold at auction to compensate the plaintiffs and other victims." The
gavel slammed, and the room exploded in applause. Vance slumped in his seat, his empire in ruins. The moment those "for sale" signs went up on Richard Vance's sprawling mansion, I felt a rush of satisfaction so deep it nearly brought me to my knees. It was a crisp Montana morning, the kind where the air smells of pine and promise, and I stood outside the gated community, where Vance and his cronies had lorded over their empire. The signs, bold and unapologetic, also dotted the lawns of Linda Carter's colonial-style estate and Greg Hollis's modern glass monstrosity. The irony was delicious. The same developer, Pinnacle Resorts, who'd tried to bulldoze my ranch for their luxury resort, swooped in to buy the board members' homes at auction. They'd lost everything, their mansions, their reputations, their power, while I stood on the precipice of reclaiming my life. This wasn't just justice, it was poetic. The HOA thought they could crush me, but I'd turned their own game against them, and now they were the ones homeless, scrambling to salvage what little they had left. The aftermath of the trial was a whirlwind. Judge Harper's ruling had been a bombshell, not just for me, but for the entire community. My 15,000-acre ranch was officially returned, the illegal sale voided, and the county records corrected. Walking back onto my land for the first time was surreal. Emily and I drove up the dirt road to our ranch house, the kids in the back seat chattering excitedly about seeing their horses again. As we stepped out, the familiar scent of hay and earth hit me, and I choked back tears. The barn still stood, the fields stretched endless under the big sky, and the creek where I'd fished with my dad sparkled in the distance. We were home, but the victory was bigger than just us. The court-ordered auction of the board members' homes generated millions, and Judge Harper ensured the funds were distributed to all the HOA's victims. Clara, the woman who'd lost her mother's cottage, got enough to buy a new home. The retired teacher and single mom from the trial received payouts to rebuild their lives. I insisted on using a portion of my share to start a community fund, helping others who'd been bullied by the HOA or similar groups. This fight had started with my ranch, but it had grown into a movement. The fallout for Vance and his cronies was brutal and deeply satisfying. Richard Vance, once the untouchable kingpin of the HOA, was now a pariah. His yacht was seized to cover legal fees, and his offshore accounts were frozen as the IRS launched an investigation into his finances. Last I heard, he was living in a rented apartment, his law license under review. Linda Carter and Greg Hollis didn't fare much better. Carter's Aspen vacation home was sold to cover her debts, and Hollis's socialite daughter had to cancel her lavish European honeymoon when their funds dried up. The gated community, once a symbol of their power, was now under new management. The remaining homeowners, fed up with years of corruption, voted in a new board committed to transparency. They even invited Emily to join, recognizing her role in organizing the victims' coalition during our fight. She declined, saying she'd rather stick to ranching, but the gesture meant the world. For me, the victory wasn't just about getting my ranch back, it was about reclaiming my purpose. The trial had changed me. I'd always been a quiet rancher, content to live my life under the wide Montana sky, but now I felt a fire to help others. That's when I started my YouTube channel, Rancher's Revenge, to share our story and inspire others to stand up to bullies, whether they're HOAs, corporations, or anyone else abusing power. The response was overwhelming. Comments poured in from people across the country, sharing their own stories of fighting back against corrupt landlords, shady developers, and overreaching bureaucrats. One viewer, a farmer from Texas, wrote, "Your story gave me the courage to challenge my town's zoning board. I won my land back." Another, a single mom from Ohio, said, "I'm taking my HOA to court because of you, Jake." Every message felt like a spark, proof that our fight had ripple effects far beyond Montana. Life on the ranch slowly returned to normal, but I carried the lessons of this battle with me. I rebuilt the herd, repaired the fences, and spent long evenings with Emily and the kids, watching sunsets from the porch. But I also kept fighting for others. I partnered with a local legal aid group to offer free workshops for homeowners, teaching them how to spot HOA scams and protect their rights. Sarah, our lawyer, became a regular guest on my channel, breaking down complex legal jargon into tips anyone could understand. Mike, our PI, even made a cameo, joking about his detective days, while warning viewers to always check their property records. The channel grew, and with it, a community of people determined to stand up for what's theirs. As I stood on my ranch one evening, the sky painted red and gold, I thought about Vance's smug grin that first day in his office. He'd thought, I was a nobody, a rancher too small to fight his empire. But I'd shown him, and anyone watching, that no one's too small to stand up. My family's legacy was safe, and now I was helping others protect theirs. If you've got a story of fighting back against bullies, drop it in the comments below. Let's keep this movement growing, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life stories of justice and revenge. This cowboy's just getting started.